name is Andreas Hammarskjöld or Hammarskjöld, depending on how you pronounce it. I'm from Sweden. I am one of the founder of 2 Point Software, and we're here to present. We're gonna keep the session try to keep it very open to get as many questions and answers. We're not gonna do a sales pitch or, try to drag you into our world too much, but we're gonna talk a lot about what we see in the industry and the discussions that we have with a lot of our customers, and probably try to see if you're having the same discussions, etc. Before that, we'll just introduce ourselves a little bit, so you have a clue on what 2 Point is and what we do. Company was founded in 2014. Really, the idea was to build on the knowledge that we have in the system management space. Myself, even though I think I'm pretty young, I'm actually getting older as well. Losing my hair like the gentleman in the OSD business as well, slowly. So what we wanted to build was a company that actually used existing technologies rather than starting to compete with Microsoft and the other big vendors. Try to use technologies that were not used as much as possible. So we started that journey a lot on the using bits and branch cache that at that time didn't have a really good name in the industry. And then of course, there's much more technologies that have come out through the years. So we tried to use and build on existing stuff rather than building our own as much as we possibly can. We ended up building a real-time sort of system management platform. We did it so that we can actually control and change the bandwidth on the fly on machines and networks. Obviously, as we had that real-time connection, we started building tools around to troubleshoot when peer-to-peer wasn't working or there were other issues with the machines. Because anyone that's tried to use the event viewer across a satellite link knows that that's a very painful experience. So that's really what we are and what we do. We build infrastructure components. I try to say that often that we're the plumbing company, right? We build sewers stuff. Nobody really cares about the toilet until the stuff comes back the wrong way, right? So a lot of companies say we don't have any bandwidth problems, etc. And then 3 weeks later they say, oh, actually we have an outage now. So yeah, now you can come in and present these. You have to fix this, right? And it's always last minutes, always emergency kind of things. So on that, I'm going to cover a little bit. Hopefully, there's not too many Microsoft representatives here in the room. And it's kind of a joke as well. We're seeing that there is a lot of people going to modern, right? But what is modern? Like, if you ask the companies that are trying to go there, they can't even agree what they're actually trying to do. So it's a very convoluted kind of environment that we see. A lot of it is driven by Microsoft, who wants, of course, they're a big company, they want to make money, right? So it's in their interest to lock you into a cloud environment that you have a very hard time to get out of. Has anyone actually migrated off Azure? No. Does anyone know if you can? And these are some of the questions that we ask our customers, like, because often they don't have a clue what they're really trying to do. They've been told something, and we have a clear disconnect between what management, and often very senior management, wants to do and what actual technicians. I had an amazing call with a technician over in Europe who basically said, can you help me understand how I should talk to management and for them to understand? Because they basically coming to me and telling me how I should do my job, what technology I should use. And it's like, in my experience, that has never happened in our group. When we were sitting and using SMS 1.2, management weren't really interested in the tools that we were using then, right? It's a late thing that has come where very senior management tries to say, these are the tools that you should use, learn them, this is the direction we're going into. For some companies, it makes perfect sense. But for other companies, like, it's impossible for them to go. This linked with more and more actual software patches, firmware applications being distributed. The situation is not actually getting any better, really. So why are we in this space, right? a lot of it is, you can laugh about the memes, right? But there is some industry trends that I'd like to discuss. Which
This should have been a thing like 10 years ago.
So I was at the World Partner Conference in 2010 and in Washington, and I was told by an actual person on stage that said, yes, Intune will have full feature parity for complementary. What year? 2010.
You did it 14 years ago.
14 years ago. So, and that's before, that was on the old Intune that was basically built on WSUS that they had to tore down and rewrite, right? So, but why is a software company like Microsoft doing things that other things basically are doing? So that's what we're going to cover a little bit here. But the situation that we have in almost every single one of the companies that we work with that have our software, or even customers that are interested in our software, is they have a senior management level trying to push a modern thing. And then you have the reality that, yes, we can switch to a management system, but the underlying problems that we're trying to do, they don't go away, right? You still, like, if you go to Intune, application is not going to automatically start to appear, package itself, and just solve itself. You still have to do these things, right? And if you want to rebuild a machine or do whatever, it's the same things. Network bandwidth and constraints don't go away just because you go modern. They actually get worse than if you have. So the issues don't really change. So, but why are we really in this mess? And if you look at the industry, what do you think makes us, why are we in this mess? Why are we having more and more conflict? Any ideas?
Shipping things that need to be patched more often.
So yeah, you're onto something. Like, why are we shipping more stuff, right? Well, a couple of years ago, developer tools and organizations started using basically pipeline builds. They built these amazing systems that can pump out new versions very, very fast. So with that, as you could fix something very fast, it didn't need to be so detailed on what you actually put in, because you would find it later down in the pipeline and then you could just fix it again. And some companies have taken this to an nth degree. Which companies do you think in the world are pumping out the most amount of versions every single day? Google, that's right. Another one, Swedish company, music. Spotify. Like, there are numerous companies that Spotify can release 3 versions in the same day.
What's a huge cost savings when you don't have to pay for your testing?
It's great. Yeah. So David James said that, it's a great cost saving. Yes, it is. You customers have become the testers of all the software. But what do you think happens when we need to deploy 3 versions of Spotify in the same day? What is it going to use? Bandwidth, right? And it would be one thing if it was just Microsoft doing this and Google, but no, it's every single software company in the world. And so are we getting more developers or less developers in the world?
More for now, but right? Well, tomorrow.
So there's a hockey stick here, right? So we're getting more and more developers. So we're getting more and more software, because that's what developers do, right? So by using a continuous pipeline, they just write more and more crap that needs to be fixed, right? And it's not only that the product not might work, there might be a security issue as well. So then they're just going to push more and more and more and more and more content. And you think that, well, it's going to sort itself out one day, right? But there are a couple of actual fundamental laws here which will make this problem never really go away. One of them is that the media will always strive to fill the medium. It applies to women's handbags, basements, attics, garages. Who in here has a garage filled with stuff and the car's outside the garage? Yeah.
Yep.
So this is impossible to fight. So like hard drives will fill up, RAM will be used, CPU, everything will be used and pushed. And if you look at this is statistics from one of our customers from 2022 to 2023. The total amount of data, I think it's for a single day, it's how much content their network was basically distributed. To the left, you have the delivery optimization, and you can see it almost doubled, right?
This is gigabyte, by the way.
Yeah. So this is gigabytes. Single day. Right. So bits, which we think is this legacy component that nobody really uses, that is also almost doubling. The numbers for 23 to 24 is looking even worse. There will be more and more content. And I saw that some bright person actually managed to figure out how to, on a, like a Blu-ray, they can now store up to 200 terabyte storage. And the new actual SSD drives that they're going for is, I think it's like 400 terabyte prints. Right. And what do we fill this data with? Who uses their phone to take millions of pictures? Yeah. Resolutions of these pictures are great, right? They're like 50 megabytes. Take 5,000 of them per year and you send it to some cloud somewhere. All of that has to be shoveled around. The same goes with all of the apps that needs to be updated, etc. And who's really happy now that you finally got to do Windows 10 only, x64, super happy. There's only one version of the OS that you got right. Well, what's coming down your way is like Windows 11, right? So now you have Windows 10 patches, x64, Windows 11 patches, x64. Well, in a couple of months, Windows will start shipping you on ARM64. Now you got another operating system. Are those the same payloads? No. Is the Spotify the same for ARM64 as it is for x64? No. So really what we can do is that if you don't have it, you don't need to patch it, right? So try to get rid of as much as you can. And if you think that I'm going to tell you that this will change, it's not going to change. And this goes back to the whole in-tune config manager concept. There's a fundamental reality where reading somebody else's code is more work and harder than writing it from scratch. Every developer thinks they can do somebody else's work in a better way because reading code is hard. Why do you think reading code is hard for developers?
No comments?
Comments could be one thing, but it's more fundamental than that. When you learn another language, not a programming language, but like if you learn Spanish or Chinese, what do you start with? You start speaking? You start writing? No, you start reading, right? To understand the language. Like a lot of people can read English, read Spanish, read German, whatever, but they're not so good at speaking. Development is the absolute opposite. You start by writing a new language that you have no idea how it works. And then you say, I'm really good at it. I'm a senior developer engineer. I've been developing 25 years. I'm excellent in writing code. I can't read any code. So I read this other stuff yesterday and it looks like a pile of shit and I can't do it. So I'm going to rewrite it. Right? And I follow a lot of developers on the planet. There's a fantastic link here. I'll share the slides later. That is basically why. Let's see if I can see it here. But, like, what type of people in the bottom here? You can see there is an actual. Really hard to see on the screen here in the room, maybe, but it's basically a program that somebody wrote. And it got an award because it's amazing, right? This is the kind of stuff that developers has to face. Like, ooh, I've made this routine so effective. I rewrote it. Yeah, nobody can read it. So for junior developers that comes in, typically you find that this like very senior developers realize this quite late in their life. and they basically want to throw away all of their life's creation and say that I wish I knew this when I started. But junior developers that comes out of university, which is typically what big companies hire because there's lots of them, right? And they're cheaper than the senior, expensive older people. But they don't know how to read other people's code, so they rewrite it from scratch. And if you mix that with different departments, with different developers, you end up with where basically the same company will have 5 different products doing almost the same thing, right? Why do we have X different versions of OneNote, right? And then there's a new OneNote, which is like even rewrite again. It's like it's hard to read other people's code. I think config manager, and when it ended up, it was actually 5 different programming languages in the product. So in order to build or work with it, you need to know 5 different programming languages, which is hard, right? So it's better we rewrite it. We start from scratch. How hard is it going to be? What do you think happens when you rewrite from scratch?
New wonderful bugs.
You'll introduce all of the issues that made the original code so complicated. And I can agree that configuration manager was, or it still is, a very complicated piece of software. Over-engineered in certain areas because it needed to work for every company on the planet, whether it's 2,000 machines or 1.5 million machines. So let's start. It's too complicated. Let's start from scratch with a simple cloud-based little product that's very simple to use. Where do you guys see Intune going? Is Intune getting more and more complicated? So fundamentally, they will probably end up with something that looks exactly the same as Configuration Manager in X number of years. Yes, it will be in the cloud. What do you think the next team is going to do?
Rush.
Yeah, they're going to rewrite this thing. So sadly, I don't think any of this is going to get any better. So what can we do about it? Well, there are a couple of things we can do. Don't fight management on their vision to go to cloud to have a better managed decision. There's no point in that. Embrace it and say, this is great that we can use this. Let's do a really good pilot, test it, and we'll propose a plan. Often what we're seeing though is that companies actually they've already made their decision. Their pilot turns into an actual production rollout to figure things out as you go, because we're going modern now. We should be ready tomorrow, right? We've worked with a customer that basically took down Config Manager, uninstalled the agent, we're super happy, ran Intune, then basically can't do what we need to do, re-roll, build up our Config Manager infrastructure again and push out. Because why? They didn't pilot, they didn't test it properly. If you have 500,000 clients doing a pilot of 80 machines, it's not a pilot. Trying to build it or do work with X thousands of machines, and then you see better results. Plan for more and more content. Every big software house today in the planet is doing peer-to-peer. Apple's peer-to-peer. Your phones are peer-to-peer when they update themselves. Because there's just more and more content, right? Apple used to say, we're super efficient in doing our thing, so we don't need to do anything around this. Until they realize that there's schools that uses iPads, Apple devices on mass, right? Well, what do you think happens when you need to update 16,000 devices like a geek on Monday mornings? Okay, so what did they do? They started peer-to-peering. They introduced the same lead-bat protocol that Microsoft has, basically, on all of their devices. So they're doing the same thing. And you need to know your network. We're still seeing a lot of people with Wi-Fi that spans like a central controller in data centers, and the Wi-Fi network spans 500 physical locations. But we tried to tell them you need to change it, not only for the Microsoft peer-to-peer pieces, but when somebody is actually wanting to connect through their Apple device against that screen. They go via the data center. That video that they're playing is going to go to the data center and then back out. So that's kind of really what I had on the slide things.
Screen up and make some color.
Yes. Yeah, probably. So this is from an environment that has been with absolutely no changes at all. Just default Windows settings, Windows being Windows, no optimization whatsoever. And hearing is terrible by default. I spent some time, I wrote about it on our blog eventually. My idea of having fun on the weekend is when I'm not preparing fences for horses, I deploy machines in the basement. A lot of them. So I deployed 25 machines with Windows 11, 23 H2. And I just let them sit there for 4 hours and see what happened. So I was measuring how much they on their own was downloading. And please note that they were fully patched from the beginning. It was the latest ISO from Microsoft, had the latest updates in it. But yeah, these 25 machines, they were downloading about 26 gig within the first 4 hours. And my poor little firewall that I had set up to measure connections had to deal with almost 70,000 TCP connections. Now, if you measure that in flows, for those of you that like that measurement, it's about half. But nonetheless, 35,000 flows is still a lot of traffic going through that poor firewall. And this was data that could have been peered. I was able to get some pretty good efficiency by accident. I usually don't. Usually I get about 20%. I was able to get 40. But there was also data that, like Andreas was mentioning too, was downloaded through non-peerable content. It's, yes, technically it could have been branch cached, but the service needs to support it. And Microsoft CDN service don't. So there are certain components that are coming down to every device that's simply not peerable by default, unless you connect it. But as you start to apply better settings, starting to leverage new technologies in Windows 10 and Windows 11, we can see that the connections are dropping down. What we're downloading is dropping down. And to get better than this, you more or less need an agent to take care of this for you. But I mean, it's simply so much traffic, and this just gets worse and worse every single day. Right now, our customers are downloading 4 or 5 times the amount of data through modern environment. And these are co-managed customers. Your config manager and Intune customers. 5 times the amount of data through delivery optimization. And obviously, if you leave config manager behind, 100% is going to be Intune. Win32 apps, yeah, they're using delivery optimization. By default, they are background, so they're not effective. You can change that to foreground, making them more effective. Now, WinGet is on the rise. You see a lot of organizations that are interested in using WinGet, the package manager for Windows, or new package manager for Windows. A lot of applications, a lot of content. They are using delivery optimization, but the backend is not enabled for peer-to-peer. Microsoft don't have it. So now you have every single client downloading on their own, whatever package it is. And they can be pretty large. Download Power BI from WinGet and you'll see a good few hundred megs coming down. What do you think the biggest package that we've seen for somebody to actually deploy?
The Adobe Suite. I was gonna say.
No, Adobe Suite's tiny compared to this.
Autodesk.
It's bigger than AutoCAD.
SolidWorks?
What's so to give you an understanding, Microsoft, when the delivery optimization technology came in through an acquisition, it was to drive and peer content for what?
Xbox.
Xbox, yes. What is really big on Xbox? Call of Duty. Games are big, right? So,
20 games.
so in the Microsoft Store, I think one of the biggest game is basically World of Warships. It comes in around 120 gigabyte, I think, depending on how you download it. But yeah, we have some customers where the users are actually be able, because you don't need to be admin to install World of Warship, right? So yeah, go to the store, install World of Warship. Yep. 5 minutes later, you see this buddy starts the same download, right? Because they're sitting in the same office. We can see like Candy Crush Saga, we can see going through finance and HR departments, fire, right? It's okay if it's peering, but if it's not peering and you've said, no, we're not going to peer any DO traffic, you will add a lot of content, right? And there's a lot of things that you still use as bits, and the bits traffic is not going away. That's increasing as well. One of the biggest things we see that using bits is OneDrive. So when OneDrive is updating itself, which is about 50 megs, and it does that more or less every other day. And it goes out through the internet. What else is using bits? Microsoft Edge, which is updating itself. Good bits job. Disney used to deliver. So, but there's a lot of things that you can do. There is a lot of technology, but you should know, we normally have the tagline, but know your network, know what content you're pulling down. And this doesn't also, I mean, a lot of the other tools have, or basically software out there. Some of them are even worse when they think, oh, it's too hard to read how to use and create a bits job. I'm going to create my own download, or I'm going to do my own peer-to-peer technology, right? So there is that too.
It's interesting in a way because any type of peering is with the idea that you somehow figure out a way to group clients together in like logical groups. And the idea is clients are well connected to each other. They should be able to share to each other. So in these circles here, each of these circles, those clients will talk to each other within the circle, but not between circles. 2 years ago, I was called in for emergency support call with a company, first time meeting them. Their engineer tried a different approach. They put a logical grouping around every subnet they had and told any client to peer with any client. So they had client in every single occasion, going basically back and forth in this giant mesh, effectively killing the entire network. There was a retail store. It was so bad they couldn't sell stuff in the stores, which is a big deal if you're a retail store. So this was all to the highest level you can think of in the company. It was a hands down situation, have to be dealt with it, simply because the engineering question didn't learn how this technologies work, didn't know the impact, didn't know how much data it actually, I mean, my 25 clients, 70,000 connections. Well, what if you have 15,000 clients and you're sending out large upgrades to them? Windows 11 is not small. Using companies that have been using Intune for regular apps, small apps, works great. Now they start to do feature updates for Intune. Those packages are not small anymore. They're 4 gigs in size. And suddenly all the policies they used to have is no longer applicable. It actually breaks the upgrades for them. Because if you allow this much bandwidth and you have this package, well, it's going to be upset.
Yeah.
Same for Windows Autopilot. You cannot throttle down as much as you may want because Autopilot is just going to say, nope, don't want it. You can probably explain for hours on how that really works behind the scenes, but long story short, if the machines don't have enough bandwidth, it's very likely that your app installs are going to break in the autopilot process. There's a lot of traffic.
And I think what we see as well is that typically the configuration manager admins used to be blank, right? But if we take a typical customer example that's using config manager, they're using branch cache, they got good peer-to-peer ratio, etc. How much of the total bandwidth for these infrastructure download components do you think is used by configuration manager of the WAN? A percentage, like how much of the WAN percentage is used by config manager?
What's percent?
Sorry, what was it?
Percent?
Now it's more than 1% typically, because if you're doing config manager, you're doing patches, OSD, like all of the app distributions for your enterprise. But it's about 10%. All of the other stuff is this constant drizzle of delivery optimization, bits updating Edge, OneDrive. Even the Outlook address book is a bits job that goes in update. So there are a lot of them, but it's very hard for the networking team to call Google up and say, hey, stop distributing your crap to my computers. But they can phone you guys and say, we see a lot of traffic going to your distribution points in this data center, because that's the only traffic they can really track. But we're seeing a lot of the networks are heavily utilized all throughout the day. And then it's basically that extra 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. or 10 a.m., whatever software distribution that goes to everybody, that pushes the links to its absolute maximum, right? But who's to blame if you're using 10%? Is it really config manager using all the bandwidth? No, but that's the traffic that you can control unless you have other ways to control the traffic, right?
I just put up some numbers from another environment. The larger one, these are in the 6 digits of clients, but they have a little bit more bits, but still the majority of the traffic is DO. Yeah. I've worked with organizations where they had to replace their external firewalls. Not so much to deal with the data, but to be able to deal with the amount of connections by going through.
Questions? So, you can do sync files from SharePoint, and let's just say you had an org that had, 1,000 people in a particular team. They all have a sync file, and somebody uploads a file, which then triggers 1,000 people to then download that file. Is there any way to utilize these tools to help optimize that?
Not natively.
Okay.
So there's no way to get OneDrive to peer-to-peer. It's been a request for a long period of time to get OneDrive to peer-to-peer. When we ask the DO team internally, like, when are you going to DO or peer-to-peer enable DO content? It's been we're looking into that for quite some time. But it's yeah. But there's nothing currently there. But that is a lot of the work that we're doing in our product set, is to try to find ways, how can we peer-to-peer enable other types of content? So we're going to release this year a service that will then basically peer-to-peer enable all of the bits traffic, because it's the easiest for us to do. So we'll take the bits traffic and basically peer-to-peer enable that for you. Then we'll looked at doing, how can we peer-to-peer enable other types of applications and tools that we're experimenting. So in the labs, we took curl.exe, for instance, and made that branch cache aware. Curl doesn't know anything around branch cache, has its own basically HTTP engine and all of that, but we were still able to get it to actually branch it.
I mean, there is stuff that you guys can do as an organization as well to making things better. This is my favorite application example, because I happen to like the application too, but it's an app that it's big, yes, but it's not like fantastically big. It's not, what's the example you mentioned? World of
Warships, yeah.
It's not that big, but it's interesting in the number of files it has. Almost 20,000 files. Think that you work in an organization that have 500,000 clients. They need this app, or even 50,000 clients. And now each client is somehow supposed to sync or replicate and peer 20,000 files each. No matter peering, that's not going to be very effective. It's way more effective to smack that into a single web file and basically download a single file that is about a third of the size. There is a reason why Microsoft forces you to create a package for Win32 apps, because they are downloaded through HTTPS. They don't want you to download 5 or 20,000 small files from their servers. They want you to download one file that they happily will extract locally and install from. What I like about WinFiles is that you don't have to extract them either. You can just mount them and install from it. And you don't need to do this for every app you have, of course. If it's a tiny app with single MSI, will work just fine. But if you have apps that has like thousands of small files, goes back to my driver packages this morning. There are things you can do to make it better. And yeah, we'll improve period.
Question in the chat. How, I'm going to say if, can you group clients together for peer-to-peer on the internet?
You can always, so if you're looking for delivery optimization only, one of the most effective ways for group clients is using a group ID. When we have our agent deployed in different companies, it figures out where the well-connected networks are and automatically puts them in the same group, same location. But there is nothing that prevents you from hard coding in and say, yeah, these clients are supposed to be the same group, these clients are the same group, and these clients are the same group. You can absolutely do that. It's a policy. It's been available since it came. Understand.
Hope that answered your question, Keith. Thank you.
It's a funny deal. It was an acquisition, a company called Pando Networks that Microsoft acquired back in 2013 and moved them into Microsoft, and that became delivery optimization in Windows 10. Especially the first few months where the community was screaming for the top of the lungs how bad this was, how much it affected their network. And Microsoft like, we haven't turned on the server end yet. There is no peering yet. And eventually they did. Was it 1511 time frame? Yeah. Peering is here to stay, definitely, because when we start to see just Windows being Windows, gigs of content, and I cannot tell you why and how, but this year is going to be worse. Much worse.
And it's because like Microsoft is striving really hard to make Windows a sort of subscribable piece, right? So all of the components becomes little apps. But we talk to customers and they say, well, we don't use apps. Like we don't use store apps. And we're like, well, you kind of do, because everything in the operating system is now really an app. And they're like, no, we don't use any store apps. Well, how do you log on? Well, put in control delete, whatever. Yeah, that's an app. The first thing you do, that's an app that will update it through the store. It's not really a store app, but it goes the same path, right? Your start menu, that's an app. Settings is an app. Even more than modern Notepad is an app. Everything is becoming these apps, and they all need to be patched, because going back to that continuous pipeline, right? They're all pumping out their new versions of it.
Those 25 machines that I deployed, that referenced earlier, almost 100 updates within those 4 hours for the same version of Windows. Just components being updated. I hadn't installed any extra apps.
Yeah. And it's not better on Linux or Mac either, right? You think that they're doing a better job, but they're not. It's a thing that's across the entire industry, regardless of what it is.
To your example of the 100 apps, even if you somehow did update them in the distribution ISO or whatever, a week later they're going to get updates anyway, right? I mean, you can get them closer, but you're never.
Microsoft Engineering currently don't have that.
Right.
We've been in talks with them asking for it, but right now you cannot update those. Right? Even if you try to create your own image, so you deploy your image and you want to sysprep it.
Right. Yeah.
What do you think sysprep will do? smack them away.
Since Windows 8, SysPrep breaks when you update.
Yeah. One of the best ways to break SysPrep is to install a lot of updates first.
But this becomes an issue when we're starting talking about like modern Intune management. For some of the, like, what do you think happens the first thing if you take a laptop out of the warehouse and you plug it in and you're going to autopilot, right? How long was it in the warehouse for? Is it even going to be on the actual OS version that you want? Well, if you're lucky, yes. Otherwise, what do you think happens? The process, it installs first, right? Puts all the apps down, everything gets pulled down, right? Then it realizes when it's fully patched and happy, then it's going to say, oh, I'm going to go to the next version of the OS, right? What do you think happened after that is downloaded and applied? Then it has to do exactly the same thing again to update all the apps and settings. And now we're talking not like a few gigabytes. Now we're talking like 30 plus gigabyte of content that might have to come down. And if you're trying to do that over a DSL or a satellite link or in a mine out in Africa, yeah, it would be bad.
Fun stuff. Any other questions out there?
How did, 20 years ago, I used to use web proxies to try to optimize this. Do web proxies still play a role at all in this to just try to limit outbound internet traffic that somehow doesn't go to the branch cache or peering? Sure.
Yeah, so proxies definitely play a role. If you look at what I don't know if you read up on how like Doink and the Microsoft MCC cache for delivery optimization, that is basically a proxy. It's a proxy that changed to another proxy that changed to another proxy to another proxy. So because the ISPs don't want to pay money to download the same content from Microsoft multiple times, so they will have a proxy. So they will actually have a MCC server in their place, right? So there are things that you can do with these proxies to take away some of the internet traffic, but you still probably have to get it down to the individual clients. And a lot of people, like, if you have 19,000 offices, you don't want to have 19,000 proxy servers, right? So it becomes what can we do on the peers in order to bypass and remove the servers?
First of all, I hate proxies with a passion. They're usually the root of a lot of things going wrong, but caches can be useful.
Yeah.
Like the cache in particular. I was involved in a proof of concept for, in fact, the Adobe Suite. We talked about the Adobe Suite before. It's almost a 20 gig package. The only way we could have it deployed in a timely fashion from Intune to devices was to have local cache servers. Because Intune would, at that time, stop downloading after 10 minutes and say, all right, you don't download in 10 minutes, try again tomorrow.
We're in talks with Microsoft on figuring out how to deploy this in our environment, and it's a much simpler program than you think it is.
I mean, it will happily cache content that is delivery optimization or built for it. There are local versions of this as a config manager DP, and as an Intune customer, you have a license for it. So you can spin up config manager servers that are caches only. They don't have any clients. It just sits there and being in cache. You have the one that the ISPs are using now, and we have the upcoming one for enterprises, but it is an option.
It's our only option. Our security team doesn't allow peering, period. Not saying I agree with them, but that is the stance they chose to take.
I mean, we stumble across it every now and then. We are usually able to convince them otherwise, but I mean, I was
We built the peering product at their request, and then 2 weeks after we deployed it, they changed their mind and said peering's banned company-wide. So.
I mean, if you take a switch and you configure each port on basically their own VLAN, they're not allowed to talk to each other in any way or form. Peering is going to be not good.
I mean, the most secure computer is the one that's not on.
One customer I talked to, they had an interesting solution. They took their WAN links and they upgraded them to 10 gigabits each. Solved the problem.
solution.
For a while.
For
Yeah.
a while, but
Content will catch up, right?
not that many clients, few thousand only, but 10 gigabit everywhere. It's basically a really large plan.
Yeah.
I know my tax money went to a good cause because this was a government type.
But do you, like, the proxy thing is an interesting aspect because proxying, if there is an HTTPS stream, right, you need to break the SSL encryption in order to cache it, right? Which is complicated, which is why Microsoft had changed to all their download URL for patches now HTTP based, right? When you're talking to your security, you talk to the security people, they say peering is bad. Okay, we say, okay, so taking a SHA 512 protected piece of content, right? And you're replacing it with a raw HTTP stream that anyone can, and you're saying that you're doing this for security, and they're typically like, but it's not downloaded over HTTP, and you're like, oh yes, it is.
Yeah, that was definitely something that they balked at when they saw it, but we're like, this is the corner you put us into.
Question in the back, yeah.
The post-autopilot scenario, all of the updates come down are in terms of DO background, not foreground, right?
Yep.
And I, like many others, I'm sure, went to your blogs to get the settings, and when putting in the background download delay,
Yep.
I saw an increase, significant increase in time because each one of those was being hit by that delay.
Yep.
There's no way around that particular problem, right?
There is. So that's what one of the things that we do in our product side is we're randomizing. We have some machines that we know are going to be allowed to get it faster than others. So we basically randomize the delay. So if you have 12,000 machines, you put a shorter delay on maybe 1,000 of them, right? And then let the other 11,000 get from the first, right? So there are some things that you can do, but you have to do it ad hoc, which is complicated. Like we have some companies who say we don't want to have an agent. Like we like your software, what it does. We don't want to have an agent. Can you redo all of the work in PowerShell for us?
Oh, so they can do it.
We're like, that. So you're gonna we bill you consultancy to redo our software that we've written over the last 10 years in PowerShell, and you're going to maintain that through consultancy through the rest, but because you don't like an agent. But the PowerShell would be more memory, using more memory consumption and etc. And that is, yeah, that's what we want. Okay. No, we're not doing that.
Nice put on the box at the end of the day. Again, ideally, you want to dynamically be able to say this person is working from home.
Yep.
You don't care.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Like machines now start to move around. Your laptop will go from working in the sales office, go to the main office, then going home. Connect when they're home. They're not connected to VPN. Then connect VPN. And we all had those discussions about VPN and local breakout, etc. Right? There is a security issue with allowing local internet breakout on VPNs, which a lot of security people don't like, so they don't allow it. So then we have to detect you now back on VPN. We need to do different throttling. And the throttling can also be that it's not per device, it's actually per your WAN concentrator. So if you got 200,000 machines connected on VPN, but only 1,000 of them downloading, they could be downloading at pretty good speed, right? But if somebody then decides to push out a large patch so that 200,000 machines start pulling 4 gig over that VPN, no, you need to restrict a lot different.
The challenge is Windows is not very good in detecting network changes and adjust its peering based on that fact. But we don't want to have the same behavior if you are on a Wi-Fi versus wired versus VPN versus internet only. We want to configure it more optimized for each scenario. And you need more or less to have an agent to be able to do that type of job or changes. That's what
So, I mean, makes sense. You may have answered this kind of jumping in and out, but what is the impact ultimately from a time perspective, especially for people who might be moving over slow internet connection when you ship them a new business, when you ship them a new device from a time perspective? Let's say people who are on Starlink, as people become more and more of the digital nomad wanderers. Like you mentioned that you had 40, how many machines did you say in your basement again that you booted up an image? How much was it?
But that test was only 25.
Okay, I was only 25. Like what's the unique machine? Like how much content did just one of the machines do? And then what's the impact statement then? Let's say that you're on like a 10 megabyte connection because you, I don't know, live in the middle of nowhere and don't have very good internet. What's that impact statement then of the remote worker that gets that new device?
It's bad, and it goes back to what we kind of, some of the discussions that we have with senior management. They say, well, we measure time to desktop. That is our goal of how effective we are to deliver a device to our end users. It's time to desktop. And we're like, yeah, what are they going to do? They want to read their emails. They want to use their apps, right? Yeah, but we don't care about that. That's not our problem. We're like, okay, whose problem is it? Us, the business, but that's not us. Okay, so you're not the business, and then they all don't really like that where that discussion's going.
Yeah.
Like, and then because we can have something where it takes 2 days for the end user to be productive, and management sees this as a very effective way. We now basically, instead of using config manager, old images, and etc., we can deploy a machine much faster, right? Because we don't put any apps on it. Okay, so what does the end user have to do then? They have to put all of the apps on. For some organization, that's perfectly acceptable. Meanwhile, other organization says, if I don't prepare a fully working machine to my end users, I don't have a job, because they will say, okay, so I'm going to do the IT job now. Fine, I'll do it, but you don't have a job.
Yeah, I would like to know, I think that'd be an interesting slide deck to see of like, based on internet speed, this is how long until your machine or like a machine becomes fully patched for that. And also this is the potential impact on somebody else on your own network.
Yep.
That'd be a super interesting statistic to just kind of see, to get an idea. Because it's not just, and this is the other thing I think that's challenging to forget from an ecosystem perspective, especially when we have remote workers. It's not just the employee or team member that you're impacting, depending on how much internet speed you have. It's everybody else that's a remote worker in that house that you're potentially impacting as well. Then.
Yeah. No, and it is an interesting, like we have customers that decided, or they come to us because, they decided to go to Autopilot in June. They have a 50 megabit link to deploy these machines, right? Then they get a batch of like 500 machines they need to build within 2 days. The processing time for those downloads, then basically Autopilot starts breaking because it cannot download in time. And then basically they start, this is not going to work. And at that point, they've already made their decision what to use, right? So then they're in a pickle. So it goes back to pilot what you're going to do well enough before you make a decision and say, yeah, roll it out.
The challenge is that delivery optimization as a protocol was designed to be not good, whereas branch cache was designed to be a good protocol.
Yeah.
Supporting all the content being shared, supporting data deduplication for efficiencies. But if you have a client like this one I have on my left here that downloaded, say, 10 files from a package, I'm not going to draw 4 of them, but imagine that was 10 files. It's going to look out the window and notice it's good weather today. I'm in a good mood. I'm going to share 2 of them. Make 2 of them available to others. So now when the second client needs these, 10 files, it's going to be able to pick 2 of them from a friend and the other 2 from Microsoft. You usually need to have 5 to 10 clients to get that full coverage of content. Because just because it has it in the cache, it doesn't mean other clients can use it. And I know why they did this, and that was to not overload the client, to try to be a good citizen. But in fact, they just made it worse. We have customers using branch cache for like 10 years, unknowingly for most of the clients, because you can barely measure the usage on the device. Every byte that is downloaded is being shared. You can get really high efficiencies. DO is really hard to get efficient. You more or less have to have an agent that controls the flow, just because how it was built.
Yeah. There's a lot of weird things you can do. So there's a lot of tricks that exist. Like, so for instance, if you turn off delivery optimization peering on its own and you set it to download mode only, but you're actually downloading content using DO from a branch cache enabled server, what do you think will happen? the branch cache underneath the hood as it injects in the WinHTTP DLL that's doing the download for delivery optimization. Delivery optimization will actually peer-to-peer using branch cache and percent bytes, right? Which is a bit of a mind game to understand how that logic works. But there are a lot of different things that you can do. So, for instance, if you have a scenario where you need to build sequential high volume of machines over poor connectivity, there are tricks that you can do. Any other questions?
I saw one comment in the chat. I really like what you guys presented. There are curious, if you want to pitch a little more of what you're selling in this, how to help it kind of question.
We're not really salespeople, but ultimately we tried to, what Johan showed here earlier is one of the dashboards, which is we tried to work within these different scenarios where you have poor links, you need to push large amount of content. So we set these different criteria and the policies that needs to apply depending on as your machines move around. I try to visualize also, this is the state of your actual downloads. Like this is how well you're peering in these locations. And it could be like, it's okay to say, we're not peering in this location. It's okay. It's a little slow or whatever, but it's okay. In these other places, we have to do peering because we have such a volume of machines against clients. So we have to peer to peer. We've had cases where even Microsoft has gone in and disabled branch cache on their central distribution points. And they see it in our tool. Basically, they say, your product stopped working. And we're like, why did it stop working? Well, it's not peering. We're like, nobody's showing you why it's not peering. Somebody turned off branch cache. Well, who did that? And then they find out it was actually the Microsoft PFE that did that. And then like, okay, so we turn it on again. Does it start working? Yes. Right. So you don't always have to peer, but you need to know what is on your network and how your network is situated. If you're able to peer-to-peer on your Wi-Fi network and you have no idea how your Wi-Fi network sits together, and if you have central controllers for the Wi-Fi, but it's spread across, 17,000 physical locations, that will be a bad day, right?
In shorter versions, we try to detect networks, how they are organized to each other, and apply the right configuration to them.
Visibility.
Yeah. I mean, even if you only have a few hundred subnets, I would not be the poor group policy person or Intune policy person having to basically have 100 unique policies just because they happen to be different scenarios. That's the beauty of having an agent that can detect things and apply the right stuff. I mean, that's a benefit of working with pretty much the same thing for many, many years. Yeah.
Cool.
Accidentally, you get good at it.
Hopefully.
Well, if you do imaging for 10 years straight or 30 years straight and you don't get good at it,
Maybe
I think
wrong job. Yeah.
specific kind of
One more question. Is branch cache relevant or really needed in peer cache review or any?
We see our customers that are still config manager, which almost all of them are still a config manager. They heavily rely on branch cache for this. Some use peer cache, but very, very rarely.
peer cache is not a nice citizen. It can take 30 seconds to open Notepad on a device that is sharing a lot through peer cache. I do not recommend that solution. Branch cache and DO, much nicer citizens. DO is so nice, it's stupid. They are too nice, but at least nice.